Tariffs in the news. What can we expect when it comes to the construction industry? Let's get into it. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brannon, and this is the podcast all about CA from the architects, project coordinators perspective when it comes to CA. So today is all about tariffs. As you've been hearing the headlines, Donald Trump is wanting to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico. So big news. It's hitting the headlines every day. The new subject pops up on my Apple News feed, and it's just escalating. It sounds like it's getting better, but we do not know. So today I want to go through what a tariff means when it comes to the construction side of things. And we've been through this already when Donald Trump was president, 4 years ago, and the impacts that we saw from that. And then they were reversed with Biden to some degree, and things cooled down, but it sounds like it's just going to get worse. So let's get into it. First of all, what is a tariff, right? Let's just clear that right away. So a tariff is a tax on all imported goods paid by the person or company that imported them, okay? So many importers pass these costs down to the consumers by charging higher prices, or maybe they eat the costs. We'll get into that. While tariffs are collected by the government that impose, they aren't the ones that are paying to it, right? And they're not the ones that are paid by the government to another. So it makes it a bit of a tricky scenario with that. And again, let's just kind of step back here and look at tariffs in general and how much and what does Canada import into the US. So right away, we know energy products, right? A lot of clean energy, especially more on the Ontario side down to Minneapolis, all those kind of general states, a lot of clean energy into that. I'm from British Columbia and the next province over is Alberta. It's known for its oil and gas, absolutely. And back in July, 4.3 million barrels per day were being imported into the US. So it gives you kind of just an idea of numbers there. Overall, $598 billion was imported just on that sector alone. That's huge numbers in respect to that. So when we talk about a 25% tariff, that's $150 million, in tariffs alone. So this is where we're going to see kind of the challenges. Other things include motor vehicle parts, electronic equipment. But let's get into the construction side. So what is really impacted? Well, right away, in Canada, we've got a lot of natural resources. So one of them being the steel, and a lot of metal ore is brought from Canada, imported into the US. And then with your multi-factories that are refining it into the steel, and then basically taking that and then back re-importing basically the finished product, basically build and construct our buildings. So that's kind of one element that does play into this realm of how is it going to affect the construction industry. And just kind of keeping that in mind, that's just a huge element on its own. Another big one is soft lumber. We've got a lot of lumber here, right? Living in beautiful British Columbia, we have just the forest all around. I was out for the weekend at Chilliwack Lake, 4x4ing, beautiful lake. It was old. We have so many Forest Service roads around here. It's its own maze, its own network. And even though they're still logging, there's still plenty of yield, and they're still replanting and, kind of doing that growth scenario. So a lot of that is being imported, and over 8 billion of softwood lumber alone was imported last year. So it's a great material to work with soft lumber, as everyone knows. It's easy to frame, it goes up, it can last forever as long as it's protected in that respect. And if we're importing 8 billion, well, again, a 25% upcharge, that's over 2 billion right there. And, hey, this is not no Black Friday sale here. It's not us saving 25%. It's an additional 25%. So where does the numbers come out? And that kind of leads to the next topic is who pays the cost? And it's a tricky one because if you're a business You don't want to take the 25% hit. You're already taking a hit on a number of other things with, rising costs, inflation, all these extra things, higher wage costs, minimum wage, competitive salaries. All this plays a role. So do you bear the cost on the end owner? Well, maybe they don't want to buy it. Maybe they don't want it. And it becomes this negotiating thing. But again, it's supply and demand at its finest because they want the material, right? It's great material. They need the material, right? We're still continuing to grow. Housing's still booming, and 25 is looking like a very promising year. So who pays for the cost? And that is like I said, that is really the tricky question of where does that needle line? Is it 50-50 split? We don't know. And the thing is, what is Canada doing right now? Well, again, just reading through the headlines, I don't know behind the curtains information. I'm not no financial advisor, of course, but we are seeing that, Canada is hopefully not just sitting back, and we're seeing that they're trying to be proactive than reactive. And basically, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is meeting down with Donald Trump. This morning, I was reading an article about new promise to deliver additional drones and helicopters and extra safeguards to protect the borders, because that's kind of what's really triggered this request for extra tariffs. So I don't have no crystal ball in this application. I hope it all works out really well. We've been, we've been beaten down enough over the last kind of 4 years, and it's time to go through a new rebuilding phase in respect to that. But let's get into this. What does this mean to your projects that are currently on the go, that are being planned, coming up? Let's dive into that. So first off, let's talk about pre-tender. That's great. We haven't tendered the job. You've designed the bill and you've written up the specs. You're about to hit issue for tender. And now, of course, this news has come about. So what does it mean? Let's talk about steel. If your building's built, designed for steel construction, this is where it's probably going to get hit the most. And you're going to see, inflation and tariffs being applied to all this, like manufacturing mechanical equipment, right? Because again, all the metals that go into it, you're going to find this go into even like electrical components, junction boxes, like everything. The reality when it comes to Canada is we have a lot of material, but we don't have a lot of factories. Some stuff is, but the reality is it's all done in the U.S., especially when it comes to steel. And we're going to get into a story where I found where we had challenges with steel tariffs. And doing a lot of homework is steel isn't really produced here in Canada. Apparently, there's only 2 factories from one of the GCs I was working close with. That's what he could find in his research. It doesn't sound right, but, again, I won't hold him to that and hold myself to it. But the reality is, it's in the US. That's where you have all your steel factories, your manufacturer. You've got the volume there compared to us here, right? That's just the reality of it. And so that's where we basically export the steel iron ore material directly to you as the raw material. You form and fab it to basically give it to what it needs. It gets shipped back to Canada, and then we cut and then basically fabricate it from there. And then that's where it goes into our buildings. And that's where the transition becomes really tricky. So in saying that, we're going to get some very interesting prices, right? So basically, if we tender out a job today, there's going to be it could be a variety of prices. Some GCs could basically all come across the board and taking the fact that we're adding 25% to steel, and that's just how they're going to play the safeguard. Maybe some will take the risk to basically win the job and not they'll assume that it is, but again, they take the huge risk of not including that 25%. I don't know where it's going to go. If you were to tender a job right now, it would be really dicey. A lot of people would want to wait till January to kind of see where things go, right? Where, what's the first actions in the office? Are they going to hold, is Donald Trump going to sign off and implying that 25% tariff? Or is this just all kind of, we're up and panicking right now, but again, we got to treat this really serious. So, when it comes to our projects going forward, maybe you want to start thinking about different ways of design. Maybe you don't want to design these around steel because we have this tariff thing. Maybe we go right back to our natural resource, which is softwood lumber, and we do basically mass timber builds. Maybe that makes sense. It is a very expensive process, and you do have limitations to it. But maybe that's the way to go. It depends if this is an extra 25%. These are all things that you got to take into account when you're at that early stage and go how we want to go. Basically work with your quantity surveyor to budget these out. Okay. So, like I said, if you were about to tender something right now and tender coming in, like I said, prices are going to be high. They're all going to be over the place. We'll have to see. I'm very interested to kind of see where it goes over this next little bit. But too late, you've already tendered and you have closed a bid before all this news hit the mainstream. What does it mean, right? So you've got a stiff sum CCDC2 locked in contract here in Canada, and the same thing for the US, because again, you've got these import fees. Again, we're both in the same boat here. It doesn't matter if it's basically we're two different boats, but we're in the same ocean. So it's the reality, we're gonna all feel the rock from this in either way. So this becomes really tricky. And again, kind of rewinding, going back in the time here, I was working on a brand new middle school project in Coquitlam, BC, where we had this scenario. Okay? So the story is basically the building was tendered, closed, being built, foundations were going, and there was a huge amount of earthworks that had to be done, and concrete piles and stone piles, they called it. It just wasn't great groundwork. So that took a lot of time just to get the earthworks and the base foundations completed. So once steel rolled in, Donald Trump came into power, and on his first term, and at that point imposed the tariffs. And what did it mean? Again, kind of almost history is repeating itself today, back to when it was there. So these guys were already locked into this contract. And we did have the steel sub come to us requesting an extra. And when we basically pushed back and politely said, what extras are we looking at? And they couldn't give us any firm numbers, and it was very frustrating. And they knew that they were going to get extra costs, even though they didn't have the proof to do it, which again, was it a tariff or not? But we saw it in other jobs too. So we knew it was coming and it was legit. So they tried to claim the extra, but we weren't allowing it, because we wanted to see the proof, like I said. But it came down, and it was kind of a neat idea, is that he wanted to buy the steel in advance, which we were totally okay with. But for a progress claim, basically at the end of the month, to basically claim and basically pay the trade, is that material has to be on site. If typically, like I said, we find when we do the progress claims, if a contractor or a subtrade has purchased, all the material for millwork and they've built the millwork, if it's not on site, we're not going to allow it. We need to see it on site. We can't take word of mouth. We can't take photos that are pictures of another job. You can't do that. So in this case, what the agreement is that this contractor or the subtrade would buy all the steel before these tariffs took into effect. He bought it, he put it into a warehouse, and then he got it notarized, saying that this material is here. It's been all accounted for. Here's records, documentations. And if for some reason, if that building went up in flames or had, someone caught wind that there was a huge amount of steel in there and they stole it all, it was insured, it was covered. And even if they called bankrupt or anything like that, it was notarized, it was locked in, that the money wasn't lost from the school district in this case. So it was a very tricky way of doing it, but it was something that the subtrade took on himself, bear the cost, because he understood that he was locked into this price and he didn't want to pay this extra steel tariffs. So that all took place. And then it was kind of funny. He came back afterwards, once the tariffs were really real and they were coming in there, and he tried to claim an extra, which was really odd in our case, because we said, well, look, you already bought it and you didn't buy all the materials. You could only get so much of it. That was kind of the story. And unfortunately, he couldn't give us real documentation. He gave us a bunch of handwritten up documents with receipts, and it was just an ugly mess. And, it was lots, unfortunately, meetings back and forth with the owner, with the contractor, with the subtrade, us as the architects, us with our structural steel engineers as well. And unfortunately, the subtrade never did get any of that, because, again, he couldn't provide actual real concrete backup documentation. And that was it. But again, we know that other jobs were going in. They were facing the steel tariff scenarios, and just not a fun way of doing business at the end of the day. You never want to see someone lock into a price, and then when they come to the job, it's just not there, right? That's really frustrating. It's very unfortunate. We want to all win. We're all a team. We want to all be celebrating that we've completed this project in the school. So keep that in mind. Okay. So that's kind of where that one personal experience that I saw with this, and again, along with the other jobs with it, it's not a fun scenario because, like I said, who bears on the cost of this? And that kind of goes into our summary and wrapping this thing up is, it's not only going to Canada, but the rest of the world is going to be watching. Because what if this does go ahead? Maybe this 25% does get approved, moved forward, and Canada's on the hook, the US is on the hook. Like, we're playing this game of who's bearing the cost with it. What's that going to do? Is it going to slow trade down? Are we not going to import as much? There's going to be definitely some because we need it. Some people are willing to pay because that's just the way it is. Costs are going to be bared on to the end of the day to the consumer, right? Or the company that's doing it, but I doubt that's going to happen. But if this goes ahead, what does it mean for the rest of the world for imports? And I don't know. This is where my lack of knowledge isn't there. A little bit of knowledge is dangerous in that sense. So do your own due diligence, of course, in respect to that. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn and chime in and send me your overall comments. This is a really tricky one. And again, no one really has the clear answer. We won't know until the day it actually happens. And maybe at the end of this is maybe it's just another thing to basically up the borders or anything like that to ensure that the request from Donald Trump's kind of message here that it is cheap. So maybe it will be nothing, and in the end maybe it might be nothing, which would be wonderful, so we can have a thriving 2025 year. We'll have to see. Okay. But we have to assume the impact is there. The writing is on the wall, but like I said, we won't know until we get officially hit with it. So that's the hard, known line factor with this. Okay. The reality is, though, we do know is both Canada and the US are just continue to grow. And we do need to work together. You need materials. You need us, we need you, vice versa in that respect, right? That's trade in a sense. If you ever played the game of Settlers of Catan, it's a kind of a neat game where you get resources, but there's certain points where you're rolling your dice and you can't get certain resources because you just didn't build there at the beginning of the game, and that's where you impose a trade on people. Well, if you took trade out of the game, it'd be really boring because you would be stuck. You wouldn't be able to do anything, and that's what trade is, right? We've done trade from the early days. I'll trade, even going back to as a kid, I'll trade my lunch for your lunch, right? Trade is important. It's what things keep moving. In the end, it's a win-win. And this is a scary time to see what happens. So I don't know. I hope it all works out really, really well, that we can find the medium ground, that, if we don't see that, because again, it's not just the industries I listed, in the dairy industry, you name it, there's lots of things going to be impacted by it. But if it does go through, will this push us past the breaking point? We've kind of had, we've had an economic crisis. So everything in this sense over those last 4 years, again, with COVID and everything, even the whole, Russian-Ukraine war and that kind of stuff, it took another, hit with everything with the stock markets. And kind of looking at history repeating itself, again, kind of after World War One there, and the stock markets have crashed, and then basically, they eventually were in a rebuilding phase. We had the 2008 crisis, and again, the massive crash and the rebuilding phase. And I think looking at the charts, if history is repeating itself, 25 could be a good year. Will this put another damper into the whole thing? I don't know. But I hope we exceed it and it goes really well. I hope things calm down. We can continue to build, and 25 can be an amazing year. I've been meeting with architects all throughout North America. The amount of projects that are coming down the pipeline, government funded or just private funded, it sounds like it's going to be a great year. So this is just another bump in the road. Hopefully we can get past to it in that sense. But the reality is, we're not seeing home prices decrease in any way. Again, living in beautiful British Columbia, almost everything's starting at $1 million, right? It is unbelievable where it is. And this just could be another point of breaking, where it comes to the economy. So we'll see. Like I said, your guess is good as mine. Feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your honest take on it. And honestly, we can all predict what we want, but we won't know until till January when things come into effect. So that's wrapping up this episode. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to today. We've been kind of talking about the financial sides, but it is a very hot topic. It's a very important topic, and it will impact the construction industry. It is. So anyways, till next time, architects, keep designing, and contractors, keep making those blueprints a reality. We'll check you on the next one.